Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alexandra. I'm a community specialist in EcoChain, and I will be a moderator of this webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar, LCA for Ecodesign, a step-by-step guide. We also have my colleague Tara, who is going to be operating the chat and the Q&A section. And I already have our beautiful panelists, Irem and Ieke. So maybe Ieke is going to start sharing her screen and we can already start the webinar. Very exciting, guys. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you for the introduction. What are we going to talk about today? First of all, why are you here? Why are you dialing in? And why should you know about eco-design? Then I'm going to explain you what is eco-design actually. And of course, also how does it link to life cycle analysis, because that's what we are experts in. Irem will give you some real life examples and case studies of clients' projects that we did. And you already gave us a lovely introduction. My name is Ieke. I'm an environmental specialist, now LCA and ED specialist, and I've been working for 3 years at EcoChain. And on a daily basis, I help companies calculate the environmental impact of their products. Why should you know about eco-design? Good question. Well, first of all, the United Nations calculated that in 2050, the population will grow to approximately 9.7 billion people in the world. And with the way we're consuming now, we already have some extraction of resources, of course, but with a number that large, it will grow to about 90% to a lot of materials that we will need at the same rate. And this will increase 90% of the biodiversity loss and the water stress that's related to that material extraction that we would need to live on the same level as we do now with that increasing population. And also with another problem in increasing population, the waste that we will create gets more and more. It's approximately 70%. And these two numbers can be largely defined in actually the product's design phase. And also the European Commission, they calculated that over 80% of the impacts can be tackled in the design phase. So that's really interesting. What can you do with that design? And I'm sure maybe you already know this picture, but right now in Europe at least, we are using 1.7 Earths based on the resources that we are using right now. And if we grow to that number of 9.7 billion people in 2050, we would need 3 Earths to sustain ourselves. And as we all know, we have no planet B, so we have to do it with 1. So how do we get there? Well, in Europe, we have this Ecodesign directive already for some time, and this only applied to energy-related products for so far. So with this Ecodesign directive, in 2021, they saved 120 billion euros in energy expenditure. That's, to give you an idea, it's about the same energy consumption as Poland does in 2020. So that's quite a lot. But now there's a new regulation coming up, the Ecodesign regulation. This is not a directive anymore, so it will become a regulation. And this regulation will cover not only electricity-related products, but also other types of physical products. Almost any type, except food and healthcare is excluded for a bit. And with this, we will tackle all the products and all the product-related GHG emissions and particulate matter emissions of 65%. So with this new product scope, we will tackle a lot of the emissions that are happening now, and hopefully we'll get a reduction as beautiful as that one for the electricity products. Also of the product-related resource depletion, an important one for the circular economy, we will tackle 70% of the product responsible for that in the European Union. So with this new eco-directive regulation, we will save again a lot of energy-related emissions as well, because the energy is also necessary to produce the products, to produce new products, to mine the raw materials. Well, this is almost the equivalent to a European Union's import of Russian gas. So that will be a lot of savings. But how does this framework fit in what the current framework already is? So the new Ecodesign directive. We used to have already the European Green Deal. In there, you have kind of related to that, the Circular Economy Action Plan. And now on top of that, you have the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulations. So that's really what includes all of these product categories. And under there or related to that, you have several specific directives and regulations, frameworks for specific items that fit under the Ecodesign regulation. So for example, you have the Critical Raw Materials Act that says that raw materials should be mapped and also reported on. And a new one is for the automotive regulation that says how exactly automotive should tackle eco-design in their sector. So what is that eco-design that all these regulations are talking about? I will tell you. Eco-design is the integration of environmental sustainability considerations into the characteristics of a product and the processes taking place throughout the product's value chain, considering all life cycle stages of a product. So not only production, but all of them. So also use and end of life phase. And there are a couple of items that you can think about in this case. So for example, durability, your item could be repaired, for example, or an item can be replaced. Circularity, the raw materials that go into the product can also get out of the product and maybe be reused at the same level or recycled. The resources, do you use recycled content or do you use only primary content? Are your resources also recyclable or can you not recycle it at the end of the life? Then you have waste and pollution. Do you have maybe items that are hazardous materials in there or that pollute the environment? Do they affect ecotoxicity? And then you also have the footprint. With this, they mean the carbon footprint or the environmental footprint. So carbon footprint only focuses on CO2 emissions, and environmental footprint takes into account also other items such as ecotoxicity. Then I want to give you a short example of how this works for the automotive regulation. So they mentioned mainly about 6 points this is. So what they want to focus on is to design circular. So what they want to do is design already this circularity inside the production phase, so inside this design phase, and also give detailed instructions for dismantlers so that they know which components can be replaced, how they can be replaced, and that is already thought about in the design phase. Then we have use recycled content. This directive or regulation is very strict about that. They aim to have recycled content of 25% into the plastics raw material, and of that 25% plastics should be also a part of the plastic should be recycled from older cars already. So they really aim to close the loop within the automotive sector. Then they have the Treat Better initiative. So they focus really on end of life. So what happens with the cars that are older? How are they recycled or used or repaired? So that you throw away as less automotives as possible. Then improve governance, enhance cooperation between treatment operators and manufacturers. So the manufacturers are not per se the people who also take care of the recycling or repairing of the automotives. So they want to improve the collaboration between those and collect more and smarter. So also some automotives are sold across country borders, of course, but they want to kind of keep them in the European Commission. That's what I got from the regulation, because also those materials should be reused also in the European Union. And then finally, they want to cover not only cars, but also motorcycles, buses, lorries, for example. So they really aim high. Then how does this eco-design story link to the life cycle analysis part? I already briefly mentioned that eco-design also requires a footprint. So that's really what you can do with the life cycle analysis. So what is a life cycle analysis? Every product or service has an impact on the world around us. And what you can see here is that it exists of various stages. So if you have, for example, the raw material, transportation, processing, then again, transportation to the customer, the retail and use phase, and the waste phase at the end. And what you want to do is calculate all of those or map all of those stages and also connect then the environmental impact. How do you do that? Well, all the impacts are here for an example, and often mentioned examples climate change with the CO2 emissions. But for example, you also have acidification with acid rains as a result. Ecotoxicity, you have it in oceans, but also in freshwater and land. And abiotic depletion. This is the mining of raw materials, also a very important one for circular economy. So conducting an LCA goes in 4 phases. First, you have to go on scope, then the life cycle inventory, the impact assessment, and the interpretation. The go on scope, you have to determine which phases you want to consider. So you can consider only the cradle to gate, but then you have only a limited interpretation of what the impacts of your products are. What is the goal of eco-design? It's also to take into consideration the entire life cycle. So also the production phase, the use phase, and the end-of-life phase. So what information do you need for these stages? So for the cradle to gate, you need raw materials, transport distance and methods, and the production processes. Then after that, you want to have information about the transport distance and method to your consumer. The use phase, is it repaired, replaced? How long is the lifetime, for example? And then you have the end of life. Then you can have, for example, landfill scenario, incineration scenario, or recycle or reuse scenario. Here I give an example of a cotton t-shirt, for example. So the cotton is produced, this is the raw material, it is transported to the production facility, it is spun, woven and dyed, then also fabricated, and here it's transported again to the consumer. Then in the use phase is washed a lot, maybe it's repaired sometimes, maybe it's dyed by some creative individual, and then at the end of life you dispose it or you reuse it. Then you have the impact assessment. So we've mapped all of the stages for a specific product, let's say the cotton t-shirt. And then you want to connect all of the impact assessments. So how do you do that? You connect your model preferably to specific environmental data of your supplier. So maybe your cotton supplier has specific environmental data, then you use that data. If this is not available, you can select the database dataset from, for example, EcoInvent database. And then you will get in the calculation tool your environmental impact results. And the final stage is actually the most important one, because that's where you interpret the results. And you want to, for example, make a comparison between polyester and cotton. Here it's really important to look at not only at CO2, but also at other indicators. Because if you look at only CO2, you see that polyester has a higher impact. So this would mean that cotton was more sustainable. But if you look at energy consumption, the water consumption, you see that there's a difference. So it's really about comparing, and you cannot really say the one is more sustainable than the other, but it has impact on the environment and you want to limit that impact. So in a recap, why should you know about eco-design? You can really see when that eco-design has a positive impact on the environment. If you remember, I took the numbers at the beginning of the presentation. There are several regulations in the European Union, at least, that you should take into account and prepare for. And what is eco-design? Well, that's the integration of the environmental sustainability considerations into the characteristic of your product and taking the processes throughout the whole value chain and life cycle. And how does eco-design link to life cycle analysis? Environmental or carbon footprint is required by the eco-design regulations. So that's why you will need an LCA to do eco-design. And through that LCA, you can assess the current environmental impact of your product designs and measure the improvement made after you implement the eco-design principles. So it's a very useful measuring tool. I think my colleague Irem will now explain you a bit more about the practical examples and case studies.
Hi everyone, thank you for the intro, Ieke. I'm Irem and I am Sustainable Business Specialist at Ecochain. We help companies to achieve their sustainability goals. And first, I will start with eco-design journey, why you think LCA to achieve your eco-design and sustainability performance. And later on, I will support it with our case studies. So to start with, why do businesses need LCA to achieve continuous sustainability performance? So 88% of emissions coming from products and services. So product development will play a pivotal role to achieve our climate change goals. But the thing is, where to start and how to do it. And that's why actually you need to first identify where the main impacts you have so that you can have a data-driven sustainability action. Because the thing is, if you can't measure it, you can manage it. So we can fight in all battles. We need to have a focus on where to start. And by conducting LCAs, you will have a focus and more strategic and efficient way of managing your sustainability goals. But this may sound easier said than done. But the thing is, at Ecochain, we create LCA solution to enable any business user to conduct LCA And thanks to this business user-friendliness, R&D managers and product managers can team up to achieve continuous improving in your products. So now I want to follow with how the eco-design journey will look for you and at one step at a time. So first, we start with identifying your goals and expectations, and this follows by gathering data from your suppliers and your company facility level emissions. And once they are ready to go, finally, we can scan your environmental performance. What we mean by that is where your emissions are actually coming from. And once that you can prioritize your risks and where your emissions coming from, you can zoom in your specific emissions. So what we call impact hotspots, where your most emissions coming from, you can take some action-oriented implementations. And how you can do it is by using our tool, you can compare and contrast your product. Let's assume that how you can reduce your CO2 emissions if you change one material to another so that you can improve your products continuously. And also on the top of it, you can do supply chain management. Based on the insight, you can improve your value chain. And maybe most importantly, by conducting LCA, you will be able to quantify your environmental improvements so that you can share the insights and your measurements in no time. And now I want to continue with the case studies. So at EcoChain, we are working with various sectors, including food and beverage, building materials, apparel, and consumer electronics. They all in different sustainable stage and with different sizes. And we have solution for all these variety of sectors and companies. And first, I will start with Skull Candy. Skull Candy produce headphones. They are in audio industry and they are based in United States. And their goal was internally they were having desire to become more sustainable, but also they were producing headphones to young consumers with environmental consciousness. So they wanted to improve their product design to become more sustainable, but the thing was where to start. So without measuring where your emissions coming from, they could not actually figure out where to start. So by conducting LCA, they find out where to focus on, and we did it by Mobius. Mobius is our business user-friendly product that we designed for product managers and R&D people so that they can design more sustainable product within the company. And the insights from Skull Candy was, so actually the sustainability manager of Skull Candy said that LCA was an eye-opener experience for them because in the beginning they were believing the plastics were the bad guys, but later on they realized that actually the small tiny batteries that they have used in their wireless headphones were the main impact hotspots. So most emissions were coming from there. So actually this really helped them to define where they should focus on and how they can achieve high yields of emission reductions so that they improve their battery lifetime. But on the top of it, they also try to change the consumer behavior through their marketing. And besides this, batteries were not only the impacts, they also changed their packaging size and look for the different alternatives in there. And they also start their upcycling program and start using recyclable plastics. So later, I want to continue with Wabin. Wabin is one of the sector leader for building material. And as you may know, building material sector is really emittive. So there are extra regulations on them, and regulations says that they need to give scientifically backed environmental data on their products so that they need to conduct environmental assessment on their products. But the problem was it was a massive project. So how you can take control over your data if you have more than 13,000 products over 23 production sites. But at EcoChain, we have solution for these kind of problems because we have EcoChain Helix, which can handle hundreds or thousands of products from your facility in one go. And we call this bulk LCA software. So we use the Helix option to first see the big picture and we assess the whole product portfolio that they had. And not only product level, but also we see the facility level emissions. And what they have realized is actually electricity consumption was a high emitter source for them. So by using our software, they compare and make a scenario analysis that how much CO2 emissions they can reduce if they switch to green electricity. And they see that they can reduce actually 13,000 tons of CO2 by doing that. And the reason that I like Bobin case study is that even though you have a complicated and massive project, we can help you step by step. So first we can see the big picture and have a success on that step. And later on, we can dive into details. So now actually Bobin start their journey on Mobius and they are zooming in their products to make some product development while preserving the quality and increasing the sustainability. And later on, I want to end the case studies with Matjin example. So Matjin is world's first circular denim brand, and we have been working with them since 2019. And as CEO mentioned, for them, if you want to be circular, it all starts with design. So you need to know the emissions coming from in the processes that you are going through, and you need to take control over it. And right now they even have life cycle analysis report, and they are sharing all their impact transparently with their clients continuously. As Ieke gave example in the cotton, actually we use the case study of this. So if you want to reduce your CO2, cotton is the best option. But only focusing on your GHG emissions are not enough. You also need to include other environmental impacts like water use and biodiversity. And in here, we are seeing that even though CO2 emissions reduced by using cotton, actually the water use was having the highest impact. So they needed to also balance the environmental impacts in different categories and come up with ideas. And what they did was they were highly collaborating with their suppliers, and they support their suppliers' sustainable to journey and try to look for other alternatives that how they can handle this. And actually they also start using recycled cotton. And the other thing with Matjin is that they really want to be visible and transparent when it comes to sustainability and want to make sure to their customer is that by preferring Matjins, they will become more sustainable. And to do that also, they really wanted to benchmark themselves in comparison to industry standards by showing their impact reduction in a quantitative way. So these are the pictures that I take from their LCA report. And as you see, they reduced their CO2 drastically within the years, and not only on CO2, but also on biodiversity. So with the CSRD regulations from now on, you don't only need to report on their CO2 or water use, but also you need to do in biodiversity. So as you see in here, they also reduce their impact on various impact categories. And I think the main takeaway message from there is that the sustainability is an ongoing process. So you can't really make magic happen within a day, but you need to start your journey from somewhere, and step by step, we would improve it. So whether you are in an early stage in your sustainability right now, within our business user-friendly solutions, we can really shape and address your problem with it. And I would say whether within the regulations coming up, more sooner or later, you need to take control over your environmental impact and do some sustainable product development. So rather than being a risk avoidant and waiting for regulations, you can be the opportunity seeker. So I would be more than happy to give you a free call to explore your sustainability journey and give you some advice and maybe guidance about what we can do. By scanning this QR code, you can easily book a call with me, and I would be more than happy to be part of your sustainability journey.
Thank you so much. I have something more to share. We also provide the LCA Beginner Course. If you're new to LCA and you want to learn more, You can learn it with us for free. I'm dropping now all of the links in the chat, also for the call with Irem, for the free trial of Mobius, for the beginner course, and where you can keep in touch with us. Thank you so much, Irem and Ieke, for a wonderful presentation. And the Q&A chat was very active. Thank you all so much for dropping all of the questions. So let's dive into it directly. I have a question for Ieke. How important is it to get specific impacts from suppliers? I imagine it depends on what they are supplying, but in practice, do you find a large difference between using estimate values versus specific values?
Yes, that's a good question. So what is happening by default is that in the databases, so the representative data sets, the impact is higher by 30%. So always when you go out from the data sets of a database, there will be a worst case approach, which is very necessary in LCA methodology because you never want to overestimate or make your impacts more positive than they actually are. So for most instances, this is okay. But what I can recommend doing is first do your model according to the data sets from the database. So you have a generic option and then identify your hotspots on specific indicators. And then go ask your supplier, do you have more specific information for these materials or these processes? Because otherwise you can get very easily overwhelmed by all the information you would need.
And I have another question, more general one. How long does an LCA to support Ecodesign take?
Yeah, good one. But that really depends on your data availability. So I showed you the slide about what information do you need for it, raw materials, transport process, production processes, and then some assumptions about your use and end of life phase. If you have that information available, you can do it very quickly. I think in general, people need some time to collect the data. So I would say 2 to 3 months.
Another question. What I see is that the supply chain has no idea about LCAs. I think it's quite a common situation. So what do I do and who do I ask for starters?
Yes, that's a very common issue that a lot of our clients face as well. So first you will ask them about, okay, do you have any environmental impact data, any sustainability data? You gradually introduce them to the topic. And if they're really an important supplier, so you have a good supplier relationship with them, then you can introduce them as well to the LCA topic, and that it will be very valuable for your business if they can deliver that. So maybe you can share some costs in introducing them to LCA. You can also make a mini LCA of their raw material, and then we can connect it in our software.
I have some more questions about the data. Hi, everyone. In Mobius, do you use secondary data come from the database as Ecoinvent? This I know that we work with the Ecoinvent. Or is it possible for the company fill the tool with primary data collected by each supplier?
Yeah, good question. Yes, you can use both. So you have Ecoinvent access, but you can also import your supplier-specific data, definitely.
Where do I get the right data? I think this is the most popular question here in the chat.
Yes. I think I also saw some questions about, do you use different databases? So
yeah.
I can elaborate on that a bit more. We have the Ecoinvent database available in our tool, but we also have some others. So you have the Plastics Europe database, for example, some more specific databases for the Dutch construction sector. If you are only focusing on carbon footprint, so only CO2, you can use a lot of more databases too. We do have a selection of databases available in our tools right now, but if there's a need to implement another one, then that's always a possibility.
I also have another question for Irem. If I'm not familiar with LCA, am I still able to conduct it? And how do I know that this is right? I'm a beginner.
Yeah, so the thing is, our Mobius tool really designed for the people maybe do not have an expertise in LCA. So LCA methodology can be complicated, but our software is really business user friendly. And on the top of it, we also have onboarding trainings for the ones who needs more trainings. And in there, we sort of like give you some homeworks and trainings to get used to the concept of LCA and how you can be better at it. So also we give our support to you to excel on it. And I would say right now in the market, it's the most user-friendly product now that by having some interest and by using our tool, in which also once you subscribe of us, you will see that we have many videos and help desk service to also help you to tackle this challenge on your own. And if you want, upon request, we will be always there for you too. So I think you can really make it even though you don't have an experience. You just need to give it a try and start from somewhere.
Yes, for sure. I can speak from my experience. I used the Mobius tool without any experience with LCA, and I was very surprised how fast and how easy I could learn how to use the tool.
Exactly.
I have another question, I think for Ieke. What is the difference between the product environmental footprint and LCA?
Yeah, good question. It's not really the difference, but it's more related to each other. So LCA is the scientific approach of doing a life cycle assessment, and you can choose different methodologies within that. So PEF is a methodology that contains certain indicators, such as CO2 emissions, but also toxicities, and you calculate those in a certain way. And the PEF method says how you should calculate those. And in our tools, for example, you do an LCA, but you can choose specific methods. So you can choose the PEF methodology, but you can also use the EN 1584 methodology. So those are separate choices, and they mainly depend on which sector you are active in.
I have one more question with the recommendation. Are the recommendations from your LCA based on just what is beneficial for the environment, or are there any consideration for the cost? What is environmentally beneficial may not be cost effective, making consumers pay more in the end.
Yeah, that is true. That can be the case. However, that's also why these new regulations and directives are coming into place. So they can cause a financial investment or stimulants to generating or choosing for the more sustainable options. And I think the new directive and regulations really show that the European Union at least is serious about this. That opens up new business opportunities for products that are more sustainable, so they can be more competitive with products that are less sustainable.
I also have quite some questions here about the regulations, but it really depends on what industry we're talking about. And we are in Ecodesign doing a very detailed research at the moment. So we will have more content provided on the regulations in upcoming months. So that will be we will try to answer all of your questions as well, but this is a lot of data, so we need to combine it to make sure that we present it to you in the right way. Also, we are heading towards the end of the section, so I just wanted to give a little final speech for myself. I wanted to drop some links in the chat for all of the links that you might be interested in. We really want to thank you all for joining. Thank you, Irem and Ieke. That was a beautiful and very insightful presentation. For everyone, for all of the participants as well, thank you for all of your questions. Thank you, everyone. The round of applause for Irem, Ieke, and also Tara operating the chat and answering all of the Q&A in the chat. Thank you so much.
Hope to hear from you all.
Yes, bye-bye.